On today's podcast.
But it's never too early, too late to balance your hormones. So even like if you're not menopausal, you just want to be thinking like it's a hormonal journey. It's not just like we go along and then, we're in menopause. Like our hormones, we go through puberty. If we choose to give birth, did you have problems giving birth? How are your cycles? Symptoms, I call them sacred messengers. They're the body's way of saying, hello, pay attention, something's going wrong.
If you're a healthcare provider tired of just treating symptoms and ready to dig deeper into the root causes of health issues, the Vibrant Wellness Podcast is for you. With insider tips, expert interviews, and the latest in biotech research, this podcast will take your patient care to the next level. Welcome, everybody, back to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast. My name is Jen Rivas, one of your co-hosts, and I am here with the amazing Dr. Emmy, as always. How's your day going, Dr. Emmy?
It's going well. It's gorgeous outside. Might go to the beach later. So
now you're making all our listeners jealous. That's for sure. Well, today we have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Sharon Stills, a seasoned naturopathic physician dedicated to helping women improve their health naturally. With over 20 years of experience, Dr. Stills combines her expertise in European biological medicine and bioidentical hormones to empower women during menopause, transforming it into a healthy and vibrant phase of life. Excited to dive into that. And as a self-care, red-hot, sexy menopause queen, she leads by example and encourages women to dream big, just like she did when she achieved her lifelong dream of climbing Kilimanjaro after menopause. We're going to hear about that too. So get ready to be inspired as Dr. Sharon Stills shares practical tips and her passion for helping women live their best lives. Welcome to our podcast, Dr. Sharon Stills.
Thank you. What a nice intro. Nice to be here. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you, Dr. Stills. And I am going to riff off of that, Jen, because your website, Dr. Stills, is so empowering, bold, and deeply personal, and it bears repeating. Known as the self-care, red hot, sexy menopause queen. I have to know, please walk us through this experience of your own, because I think you have a really relatable story that people want to hear about.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't actually go to naturopathic medical school to be a women's health provider. I went to naturopathic medical school to be a pediatrician.
Okay.
And so I went through school and that was my focus. And I had like a, minor in psychology and psychiatrics, because I feel like you always have to include that when you're dealing with any health problem. But I was really motivated because my son, when he was young, had a lot of problems. And this was back in 89, 90, this is a long time ago. He's actually a naturopathic physician himself now too.
Wow.
And so back then he had a lot of ear infections and I was just learning. And so I helped him through naturopathic medicine. I met a naturopath over in Canada. We were living in Buffalo at the time. And there was no internet. There was no podcast. There were no Facebook. And so it was just like me in the library reading like anything I could to try and figure out how to raise a healthy child naturally. And so that's why I went to med school, because I wanted to help other parents, because I felt like I had learned a lot and I wanted to help them. So fast forward, I get out of med school and open up my clinic on my own, which I wasn't planning on doing, but I just ended up doing that. And I, seventh patient in my door had a stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
And so I know we're talking about menopause, so we'll leave that for another day, but I ended up becoming an oncology specialist, helping him to stay alive for another 10 years. But then what happened was Suzanne Summers, I think it was, what was it called? Sexy Years, or her first book came out very shortly after I opened my clinic doors. This was in the early 2000s. And a woman came in to me and she had the book and was like, can you do this for me? I want to be vibrant like her. And I always joke around saying, I knew Suzanne Summers as Chrissy, the dumb blonde from the Three's Company show. If you're old enough, you remember watching that. And so I was a little taken aback, like, wait, she's writing medical advice? But I have a very open mind, which I always recommend you as a physician do, or if you're a patient listening, you find a healthcare physician who has an open mind. And I said, sure, let me see what Chrissy, the dumb blonde from Three's Company, has to say. Let me borrow the book for a week and read it, and I'll get back to you. So I read the book and I was like, Chrissy, not so dumb after all. And this makes a lot of sense. And plus what I know from studying in naturopathic school, but also my studies over in Switzerland and Germany, like I can make this even better because I take a terrain-based approach. And it's not just about taking hormones, it's about putting hormones into a balanced vessel, a balanced terrain, so that they work even better. And so I prescribed her the bioidentical hormones, and it pretty much just exploded from there. It's like that hair commercial. She told two friends who told two friends, and just so that's what happened. She told two friends who told two friends, and the next thing I knew, I had like this giant bioidentical menopause hormone practice. I was like parallel with my naturopathic oncology practice, and then everything else in between, because it was a general practice and I saw everything in between. And so at the same time, I was in my early 30s and I was not the balanced hormone queen. I had had hormone issues my whole life. I had PMS so bad that it pretty much just took over my whole month. I'd bleed, and I didn't feel horrible when I bled, but you never feel perfect. And then like the week after bleeding, I would feel okay. And then it would just all kick in, and the bloating and the breast tenderness and the crankiness and just everything, the cravings. And that's how I would spend my days. And here I am, I'm treating these women who are, a lot older than me, in their 50s, their 60s, beyond. And I'm watching them look through my eyes like they're getting younger, they're getting sexier, they're getting healthier. They're like thrilled. And I thought, one of the tenets, one of the philosophies that we say when we graduate, physician is healer, heal thyself, and docere, teacher. And I am a big fan of being in alignment. Like I'm not the doctor who during med school was eating coffee, chugging coffee to stay awake and eating donuts. And I've always practiced what I preached. And I always think that's a very big piece of why I've been so successful, because I'm energetically aligned with what I'm telling other people to do. And so I thought, wow, this is not an alignment. Here I am helping these women with hormones, and I'm like dying on the inside and wearing a big balloon dress because I'm so bloated. And so I thought, I got to do what I'm doing for them, for myself. And so obviously treatment for a premenstrual 30-year-old is different than treatment for a woman who's going through or has been through menopause. But I started to apply the same principles and the glory of bioidentical progesterone and supporting my liver and my lymphatic system and my gut and so on and so forth. And then I healed my own hormone issues, so much so that when I went through menopause years later, because this was my early 30s, and I went through menopause, I was 48 when I stood on top of Kilimanjaro, exactly a year to the date from my last period.
Awesome. Oh, wow.
And so I didn't even have hot flashes. I never suffered. And I talk a lot about a lot of things are common, but they're not normal. And so we think it's common that menopause is the beginning of the end, and you're not going to sleep, and you're going to get fat, and you're not going to want to have sex, and all of these things. But I didn't have any of those issues. And it's not like, because I'm like, trust me, I've had plenty of health issues. So I wasn't born with perfect health. I have to work at this. But it was because I pre-gamed and I balanced my hormones. Because if you're a physician listening and you're working with women who have infertility, who have fibroids, dealing with endometriosis, heavy periods, migraines, et cetera, all these hormonal issues, if you don't clear them up then it's just a sign that menopause is going to be a little bit of a train wreck. And so because I had cleared my hormones up, like I said, when I went through menopause, I felt freaking fantastic, and I never had a hot flash, and I never suffered, and I was on the right hormones and doing all the things. And I was 48 then, I'm 55 now. So it's been 7 years already that I'm postmenopause. And I just feel like every year, every moment, every month, like I just get healthier, feel better. I'm healthier now than I was in my 20s. I'm in better shape now, like just the whole thing. And so I'm really on this mission to change that conversation, to change that belief process, because it's kind of something that society has just handed down to us.
Yeah.
You could be standing in line at the bank and, of course, you're having a hot flash and the woman in front of you is like, oh, you must be in menopause. I know, it's horrible. So it's all over. And then I'm also really passionate about changing how menopause care is delivered to patients, because I see a lot of patients who have even been to other naturopaths or functional medicine doctors, and they're still not having their hormones handled properly. And they're not having their hormones monitored properly. And they're not having their hormones administered properly. So I want to really help to change that too, to educate other providers so they can give good care.
Absolutely. And I really want to get into those clinical pearls, Dr. Stills, because there's an art to this, and every practitioner does it a bit differently. So, and I can see that you really are the poster child for healthy and thriving and beautiful menopause and post-menopause. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty, though, I would love to know, as you say, you really lead by example. So what does self-care look like for you now? Has it changed since menopause? Have you added anything? Have you tweaked anything? I'd love to know kind of what your routine looks like now.
Oh gosh, that might take up the whole episode. It definitely looks different now than then, because my children are grown. So my responsibilities have changed. And that's the thing when you're going through menopause, I had my kids early. So by my early 40s, I was already an empty nester. But even if you had them later, by this time, they're usually flown the coop, they're at college, they're getting ready to go to college if you had chosen and had children. And so that to me just gives me so much more space. So when I was in naturopathic medical school, I was a single mom. I was going through med school. I had a massage practice to make some money. I had a lot going on. So my self-care then consisted of going to bed at 8:30 and getting up at 4:30, because sleep is a non-negotiable. And now, anytime. So if you're listening, like sleep, number one, non-negotiable. And then at 4:30, I would wake up and I would sneak out of the house. I just happened to have a Zen monk living around the corner from me. It was like very cool.
Right, that's convenient. I love that.
I would go over there and I would meditate, because meditation is also like a non-negotiable. But I wouldn't be able to stay. They did tea ceremony and chanting, and I would be able to stay for like half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. But I would get that in. And then I would come home and I would get on the elliptical or the stair stepper at the gym, at the apartment I was living in next to the medical school. And I would get in a half hour of cardio, because like that was my self-care. It was like some cardio, some meditation, and good night's sleep. Now I don't have so many, I have a lot of responsibilities and things going on, but I am more the keeper of my own schedule. So my mornings are gratitude, meditation, getting my feet on the ground, watching the sunrise unless I sleep past it, but setting the circadian rhythm by watching the sunrise, getting my sun time, getting in my infrared sauna, doing red light, doing my Weber laser helmet, doing my Avicen for I do a lot. I do my foot plates. There's a lot of things that I do. It's meditating, it's getting chiropractic care and massage and facials, and it's being kind to myself. It's the thoughts I'm thinking. It's doing therapy if I need things to be worked out. It's constantly growing and looking. And it's really, to me, one of the greatest gifts of self-care that I've given myself is my schedule and giving myself like white space. Because when I was in medical school and it was just like blah, 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 blah. And then when I opened my clinic and I had 2 kids who were in like junior high school, and I'm trying to make a clinic and I'm raising them, and it was, nonstop. And now, even though I'm very busy and have a lot of projects and see patients and all of these things, we're opening a new clinic, but it's on my time, and I know the value of having a day not scheduled or not booking myself from 8 to 8 without any breaks. And so I think self-care has to look different for everyone, and we have to really make it a priority, because I could have very easily, when I was in med school, been like, too much going on and not do the self-care. So it has to be something that we really understand, that we have to give to ourselves. And so menopause is this beautiful time. I write menopause with the parentheses around the pause, because I really want women to pause and evaluate, not just like their hormones and their adrenal glands and their gut microbiome, which they need to do that too, but also to evaluate where they've been, what their dreams are, where they want to go, how are they spending their days, and, time management. Because you can easily get on Facebook or Instagram and scroll mindlessly, and there goes an hour. And so we have to get honest with ourselves. What are we making time for? What's important? Because if we don't make these decisions for ourselves, no one else is going to come in and be like, you really should be doing this. It's better for you. We have to take self-responsibility.
I love that. Dr. Stills, you are my beacon of hope, because I am in, I'm neck deep in that season of life right now with 3 kids and all of that. So I absolutely, everything you're saying is truly resonating with me. And I love to hear that you're on that other side. And what I love even more is how you change the lens of the perception of what menopause is, because I do believe for so many women, it is this negative connotation of just something we have to get through, and it's going to be terrible. So, I want to talk about maybe some menopause myths and misconceptions that you'd like to address. And I feel like you've already hit on some of them, but let's talk more about that.
Well, I think one of the myths is that I'm going to go through it naturally, so I don't need hormones, or hormones are bad, or estrogen causes cancer, or, the whole delusion around hormones. And so I want to just really set that record straight, because why, some women think, well, I'll go through it naturally and I'll take, black cohosh or maca, but your body is not deficient in maca or black cohosh. It's not like you went through menopause and your ovaries stopped making maca. Your ovaries stopped making estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. And yes, theoretically your adrenals pick up the slack, but most people's adrenals are not ready for that job, because they're trashed, because we live stressed out lives. And even if they do, they probably don't take over well enough to produce what we need to be therapeutic values for the protection. And so, I'm all about natural. I've been a naturopathic doctor for a very long time now. And I pretty much, other than prescribing bioidentical hormones, I don't prescribe pharmaceuticals. I mean, a lot of people in our field lean more towards green allopaths. And if someone comes in with a virus, they prescribe an antibiotic, or for a UTI, and I have treated everything from COVID, long COVID, pneumonia, erysipelas, sinusitis, you name it. And I've always done it with natural methods. I don't use antibiotics. I don't use blood pressure meds. I don't need to, because I understand the terrain. I understand the body. I understand my medicine, and I use it appropriately. So I'm pretty natural. Like I said, I practice what I preach, gluten-free, dairy-free, this free, I'm in it. I am living the naturopathic lifestyle, because I was very sick as a child. So if I don't, I have burnt out my adrenals. If I don't live this way, I'm not going to be able to show up and contribute to the world and my relationships and so forth. So I think that needs to be, it's just getting in your way. I want to be natural. Well, there's nothing unnatural about putting back in, copying nature, as my teacher, Jonathan Wright, the father of bioidentical hormones, would say. We copy nature. So if we stopped producing, we give back bioidentical that the body recognizes, and we give it back in subphysiological doses. We're not trying to make you 18 again. I certainly don't want to be 18 again. We're just giving you enough that you are able to function. So your symptoms go away, but it's not just about suppressing your symptoms. I mean, yes, I don't want you hot flashing and all that, but it's also about the protection for aging gracefully. We live a lot longer now. So when we were dying and, childbirth and we'd die, or we'd only make it to our 40s, and our ancestors, there wasn't as much of a need, but we're biologically designed to make it to 120. And after I started doing some intermittent fasting and prolonged fasting, I actually feel like I gave myself an extra 10 years with those practices. So now I'm saying I'm going to live to 130 instead of 120.
I love her.
So we're designed to live that long. And if we don't have our hormones, that's when we leave ourselves open to osteoporosis, to cardiovascular disease, to Alzheimer's, to breast cancer, to urinary tract issues, to immune dysfunction. And then, of course, the more the hair falling out and the skin not looking good and the weight coming on and all of those things as well. And so it's very healthy and natural to replace your hormones and to replace them wisely. So that's a myth and I can just tell you, after all my years in practice, I've seen time and time again patients who have only wanted to be natural during their menopausal experience come in and they don't feel good still because it doesn't really do the trick, and they're still having symptoms and they're still not vital. And then I'm like, what do you think? You want to try it? Let's try it. If you don't like it, we can always stop. And every time they're like, dang, I wasted so many years. I feel so much better. I should have done this from the beginning. And so sometimes we can self-sabotage ourselves with some beliefs that we decide to carry. So that would be the first thing I would say, is that, I'm not a this for every person, but I am pretty, when it comes to going through menopause, bioidentical hormones, and I've had through the years, there are patients who, they respond paradoxically. I have some patients who need little mini doses because they're just hyper responders and so forth. So obviously it's got to be individualized, but it's one of the biggest pieces to aging gracefully. And then of course we layer on everything else. At least I do. I mean, there are a lot of hormone clinics out there where you go and you get your hormones and they overdose you and they don't really monitor you. And maybe you feel good for a while, or maybe you don't. And they don't really even talk to you about your diet or your nutrition or your gut or your adrenals or your thyroid or your insulin or all these other really important pieces that have to be in play. So I'm kind of like, how do I put this? You can have your hormones in my office as a patient, but you also have to be, we're going to take away your hormones if you're not doing the other stuff, if you're not supporting
Fair.
It's a package deal. It's a package.
It is.
And you're looking out for them in that way too. Absolutely.
Yeah. In the end, yeah, absolutely. It is really for the best interest, not because I feel like I want to be mean.
Right. It's the whole package. So, Dr. Stills, you mentioned this patient could have started earlier. So that's a really good segue into, based on your experience in general, of course, when or at what age should women start considering bioidentical hormone replacement?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about it's kind of like when we talk about cancer, you don't just wake up and get cancer. You pretty much, your body is growing it over your choices and toxins and things over time. Although there are some post-COVID weird turbo cancers going on, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So, so you have to think about it. If you are symptomatic and you are having premenstrual issues, or you are starting to not get a period or get very heavy periods, or all of a sudden you have the appearance of fibroids, usually, and I'm just going to do usually because we're not going to go into every individual case, but the typical is that perimenopausal is that you start to get into an estrogen dominant situation. And maybe that's you're producing too much estrogen, or you're producing the wrong kind of estrogens, or you're not detoxing and clearing out your estrogens. Maybe your bile isn't flowing. Maybe your beta glucuronidase is activated in your gut. Maybe your liver's not processing. So there's lots of different reasons why you might be hanging on to it. Maybe you're getting exposed to too many xenoestrogens in your body care products and the pollution and so on and so forth. And so maybe you just have an estrogen dominance because of those reasons. And maybe you have an estrogen dominance because you're really not producing progesterone. So there's different reasons you can have an estrogen dominance. It's relative, right? It's your relative estrogen to progesterone. So you have to figure out that. And often women need some progesterone. They don't necessarily need estrogen. Estrogen, she is the queen and she roller coasters during perimenopause. So it can be, so that's where, like you said, the art comes in, because I don't do a lot of testing during perimenopause. And I see women will come into me and they'll be had testing, and unless you're going to like test every day, like you can miss it. So I see women mishandled because, maybe they went in and got the test and estrogen was at, the top of the roller coaster. And now they say you have too much estrogen, but maybe estrogen went to the bottom and didn't really climb the hill again. So you really have to look at symptoms, what's going on, what they're experiencing, and kind of finesse it. You also have to do the right type of testing, which we should definitely talk about since you're vibrant and I love you and do all my testing with you. So to answer your question, like how soon should you start? Typically what I see is progesterone comes on first, and then depending DHEA, pregnenolone, testosterone, depending how it's going, how much their estrogen is. But you want, you're losing hormones before the actual event. So you can be perimenopausal and need small doses of estrogen and so forth in individual cases. It really just matters. But, I think like the traditional school of thought is, you want to replace hormones within 5 years of menopause. But I have women who didn't know, come to me in their 70s, their 80s, and I put them on hormones, and it's still a game changer for them. And, we have to catch up, but it's never too early, too late to balance your hormones. So even like if you're not menopausal, you just want to be thinking like it's a hormonal journey. It's not just like we go along and then, we're in menopause. Like our hormones, we go through puberty. If we choose to give birth, did you have problems giving birth? How are your cycles? Symptoms, I call them sacred messengers. They're the body's way of saying, hello, pay attention, something's going wrong. And I come from the school of thought of, I believe in the quantum and energetics and emotions and trauma, and all of that really drives a lot of our physical experience. So by the time it gets to, excruciating headaches or major digestive issues, there's a lot that needs to be unpacked.
Absolutely. Yeah, so much to think about. And we are going to get to testing, but before we get there, and you mentioned your work in oncology, so it's a no-brainer that your background really sets you up to provide safe and effective hormone replacement therapy. So in general, of course, what's your treatment approach for survivors of estrogen-dependent breast cancer when it comes to menopause? I know that's a fully loaded question, but things like vaginal estrogen, do we stop there? What other therapies are you using?
I'm using them all. So I believe estrogen doesn't cause cancer. That's what I just said. Like if someone's listening, like, what? It doesn't. Otherwise, when we went through puberty and had all our hormones surging, we'd see like teenagers, or now it's even earlier, getting breast cancer. We don't see that. We see it after, postmenopausal. The same with men. Right? So they think, testosterone causes prostate cancer. But no, it's men who are older whose testosterone level drops. So I learned this early as a baby doctor over in Switzerland. And so I've always used hormones with patients who are dealing with cancer diagnoses. And it's to me, and I don't mean this disrespectful, but without finding a better word, it's like lazy medicine. It's when the oncologist says, you can't take any supplements because they're going to interfere with your chemo. Like, that's lazy medicine because it's in the literature. We know there are a lot of supplements that support chemo, that support the process. So it's lazy. So to say that estrogen causes cancer, to me, is lazy. Because first of all, estrogen is an umbrella. It's a word. There are different kinds of estrogen. And so it's about the balance of estrogen. It's about the metabolites. For instance, 2-methoxyestradiol, which is a metabolite, I was going to say it's well known, but I mean, it's well known in my world.
Right.
And in Europe, and the pharmaceuticals are trying to make a medication out of it. Like, it treats. So it's, we're not talking about estrone, which is very proliferative. We're talking about estriol, which actually is not proliferative. It's inhibitory. It hits a different receptor site. And so when we really understand, and that's why 24-hour hormone urine testing is so crucial. So, like, if you're listening and you're a practitioner and you want to work with women and or men and do hormone testing and hormone, prescribing, you've got to be doing 24-hour hormone urinary testing. Otherwise, you're missing the boat. You can't check it in the saliva. It's not accurate. The levels get elevated when you're on hormones, so it's not a good way. You can't check it in the blood because it gets very confusing. First of all, you can't check the different kind of estrogens. You can't check the metabolites. And even when you're on hormones, it's like, well, when did you take your hormones? Because, like, I just said the other day, a patient went and got some blood done and they drew her testosterone and it was like sky high. And I'm like, well, when did you take your testosterone? So, if you just take it and you go, it's in your serum and it bops the levels up. And I happen to have a 24-hour urine on her at the same time. I was like, look, your testosterone is very healthy. Metabolites look great. Like, don't be misled by the blood. So I'm not saying don't use blood, because trust me, I run a lot of blood. I don't know anyone who runs more blood than me. I mean, my patients go to the blood drawing station and they get really rude responses from the phlebotomist, like, oh, you must have cancer. I had never seen anyone have so much blood drawn. But so I love blood. I love it for thyroid. You got to, check a DHT, check your sex hormone binding globulin. You can check a DHEA. You can check testosterone if you time it properly. I mean, there's things you can do with blood. But if you are calling yourself a hormone specialist, or if you are a patient listening and you are looking for someone to help you because you want to get on bioidentical hormones, then you want to work with someone who's utilizing 24-hour urine testing. And so, like I was saying, we don't let patients, if they're not doing the whole program, we take away their hormones. We take away the hormones if they don't do their yearly 24-hour urine test. And it is just like Dr. Emmy said, it's for their safety. Mm-hmm. Like, if everything looks good, I want to check you once a year because things change. Stress levels change, environment change, things change. And so it's important to check. And if everything looks good, you get the gold star from me. And I'm like, see you in a year. Enjoy your life. But it's really important that we monitor properly. I see so much where patients have all these expensive tests done, and either no one's like reviewed the results with them or actually done anything about the test results, or two, they've reviewed them, they put them on a protocol, and they never retest and they never recheck. And you're just like hanging out. Well, so did it get better? Did the protocol work? Do we need to go in and do something else? And so it's really important that we recheck, we test, and especially with hormones, because they can. So, for example, in estrogen metabolites, there's the 4-hydroxyestrone, which is the more dangerous metabolite, known to contribute to DNA damage and can be affiliated. I wouldn't say not one thing just causes breast cancer, but you don't want to see that high. Mm-hmm. So it's important to be monitoring and looking in the 24-hour urine, because I do see that high in patients. And sometimes when I put someone on bioidentical hormones, their metabolism will change. So you have to watch that and then address it so that you can get the metabolites back where they belong in the right ratio.
Wow.
Fair.
That's great stuff. And you're obviously a huge proponent of Vibrant, and we love you for that. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the labs. It sounds like you very often use our urinary hormone lab test. Is there any other labs that you use in general before starting these therapies?
So, I always tell patients, like, I spend their money like it's my own. So I don't do testing because, like I was saying, I've seen doctors just run boatloads of tests and then they never really do anything with them. So, like, if I'm running a test on you, we're having a follow-up, we're reviewing that test, and either, it was great and we don't have to do anything, or it wasn't great and we're doing something about it. So I do like to get adrenal testing. I like to get 4-point salivary cortisol rhythms because I want to get an idea of what's going on with the adrenal glands. I do like to do blood testing for thyroid, doing all the, the 6 main with the antibodies and the reverse T3 and the free hormones and so forth. Because I think that's a really good way to look at the thyroid. But I also like to do iodine testing. I like to check temperatures. There's a lot of other ways. And I use labs. I always say it was a good doctor day because my patients matched the way their labs looked. And that's always nice and fun. That doesn't always happen. And so I always go to the patient first and foremost. So, like, if they are the poster child for thyroid issues and their free T3 is in range, well, we're still probably going to do a trial of T3 after we've made sure the adrenals are on board, because you don't want to rev the thyroid without focusing on the adrenals. But just because it's in range doesn't mean it's in their range. And so my experience personally and professionally for many, many, many years, and I hear people talking about this now, but I just kind of figured it out on my own in my practice, that a lot of women don't feel good in the middle of the free T3 range. They actually have to be at the high end or even over it to feel good. And so, an endocrinologist will be like, "Oh my God, you're hyperthyroid." But, like, they're not palpitating, they're not sweating, they're not anxious, they're not having diarrhea. And so we have to, so again, back to what Dr. Emmy said, it's an art. It's the science and art and practice of flowing and dancing with lab results, with what your patient is presenting. So it's all of that. And I do utilize, I love your neurotransmitter test because I find it to be accurate, and I haven't found that in the past. I love your gut zoomer because that's the one out there. I love your food zoomers. I've really stopped doing food sensitivity testing other than the zoomers. I just find like those are the most accurate because they're really zooming in and looking at those peptides. So I just do the zoomers, and I feel like they cover the big offending factors that patients and human beings typically suffer with. So I'm not so worried about, if you're sensitive to a blueberry, because we know typically if you're sensitive to a blueberry, it's because your gut is leaky, and we're going to see that in the gut zoomer anyway. Right. So I'm more focused on the food zoomers now. It's funny. Like, sometimes I think people think because I'm so known now, and I host Menopause Summit every year now with Doctor Talks, and I speak out a lot about menopause. And if you go to my website or you go to my Instagram, like, it's very menopause. But I think people forget, like, menopause is like, you're still a body. Like, I don't just treat menopause. I work with patients dealing with Lyme, with cancer, with autoimmune diseases, with anxiety, so I kind of go through all the tests. I want to rule in or rule out mold, which is a huge problem now. I want to rule out or rule in Lyme and tick-borne pathology, which is another huge problem. And, mold can be mimicking estrogen symptoms. And so so I love your mold test. I love your Lyme. These are the best. I'm not being like paid to say this. These are just what I use in my practice because they are the best tests. And I have been through, like, I've been practicing over 20 years. So I've been around the block many times. And I've been through I'm not going to name names, but like I've been there, done it with the other gut tests and the other food tests. And like for me as a doctor, it's just like so nice to be like, I just have a home at Vibrant and I can just utilize all these tests because they're accurate and they help my patients and the results are meaningful. And when we implement protocols to address the results, I see change. I see change in the patient. And then when I retest, I see change in the test results. So we know it's working on both levels. So I don't know if I'm missing any of the ones that I like your micronutrient test too. So, I kind of, it just really depends on the patient, how ill they are or not, what they are able to handle. Because if you overwhelm someone, then, you're not going to get very far either. So when it comes to hormones and menopause, I like a gut test. I like adrenals, iodine, blood, and the 24-hour urine. Those are kind of like baseline. It's nice to do like a DNA test and understand that information, but that's not going to really guide how I'm treating someone.
Mm-hmm.
It just might answer a question if someone is like paradoxical or non-responding or responding weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's good information to have, but it doesn't have to be done first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Stills. I think it's helpful to hear how you approach this holistically with the different tests. And you touched on this a little bit before when you spoke to women presenting in the premenopausal phase, lifestyle factors that might be impacting fibroids or PMDD. But what have you found to be the most impactful lifestyle factors for maybe setting up a woman for an easier transition through menopause with or without hormones, or maybe a not so easy transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think finding your inner peace and finding your space. So I also, when I was a baby medical student, I got introduced to MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is the work of John Kabat-Zinn out of UMass. And so that also became embedded in my brain as how I think as a doctor. And so I often say mindfulness is the best medicine, and your breath, and learning to slow down, because a lot of our diseases and our hormonal imbalances are a disconnect. We're very cyclical, rhythmic creatures as women. And when our hormones are out of balance, it's like we're out of balance. We're not connecting to nature. We're not connecting to our own gut instincts and our own flow. And we're being too many things to too many people. And we haven't learned the art of the sacred no or the sacred hell yes. And so
Love that.
I think those are really, really important to me. The mind and the body, they're inseparable. They're married. And when we can take progesterone, which, I mean, I have gotten more flowers from husbands of patients because of that molecule. Because it's like, thank you, Dr. Stills. Husbands love me because I give them back their wives, and then often the wives send the husbands so they can keep up with them in, whether it be hiking or in the bed. So
I love it.
So, progesterone is a big game changer. It can really take away anxiety and bloating and moodiness. I call it like nature's Xanax.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big one. But again, if you're just taking progesterone, but you're still not connected, you're not sleeping, you're not slowing down, you're going to yoga, but you're like running in because you squeezed it in and you don't stay for Shavasana, or Shavasana's over and you're like, boom, out the door, so it's really trying to find this flow. And again, like I said, I know we're all at different stages in our life. So it changes, maybe when I had my clinic and my kids and everything, I stayed in Shavasana for 10 minutes. Now I'm like, I could stay for 20. I'll stay till they kick me out, because I make that space. And I also think paying attention to your liver and your gallbladder, the forgotten bile flow. We're pretty up against, everyone loves the liver and wants to support their liver. But we need to make sure our bile is moving too. And a lot of women's bile is stuck. It's not flowing.
Mm.
And so supporting your liver, and that could mean just doing castor oil packs. I'm like a huge fan of the castor oil pack. It helps to move the lymphatics. It helps to detox. I mean, it's just such a nurture, and it forces you to sit down because, I tell people to do them the old fashioned way with the heating it up and saturating in a dry, low EMF heating pad. So you ain't going anywhere. You got to sit there. You got to meditate. You got to listen to music. You got to have a conversation, And I think also, having like an awareness of EMFs, which are just, they're these invisible toxins that are destroying us. And so putting down everything has like a good side and a dark side. We have our side and we have our shadow side. And so it's the same with technology. Like I wouldn't be here talking to you if we didn't have technology. But if we're on it too much and we're just scrolling and we're sleeping next to our phones. And so we have to have good hygiene around our EMFs. And like for the ladies and the men too, I cringe, I cry when patient comes in and like, oh, let me take my phone out. And they pull it out of their bra. And like, it's, it's not in mode. So like these phones, need to be away from us. They are emitting harmful EMFs, and we need to turn our Wi-Fi off at night, and we need to counteract it and put our feet on the ground and earth and reconnect to nature. So those are some things I would say. And, we didn't talk about diet, but of course, eating a healthy diet is, we can't ignore that. That's a cornerstone of health and wellness. And what I will just say, one other thing is that when you go through menopause, like your exercise, like a lot of women will come in and say, what I used to do doesn't work for me anymore. And so that high cortisol aerobics is not always what a woman going through menopause needs. She needs more weight bearing, weight training, walking, getting your steps in, but the weight training is really important. We need to build muscle. Sarcopenia is a big issue in the aging population. So we need to build muscle and build our bones to be protective against osteoporosis. So that was a big one for me because I was like an aerobic junkie. So that was like a big one, like, ooh, really? I love doing that stuff. So, I still hike and stuff, but I'm not like running the trails now, walking them. But that's an important one to think about.
I love the practical tips that you're sharing with women. I think it's so important. And these are all, for the most part, very easy things that we can sort of fold into our lives and start to change. I did have a question for you, Dr. Stills, about what you would tell women that are maybe confused about what's normal as we age versus what could be a very strong hormonal imbalance or perimenopause sort of state. Would you have any advice for women there?
Well, what's normal is to be able to sleep through the night, is to have sustainable energy through the day, but realistic. Like sometimes I have patients go, I'm suffering with fatigue. And I'm like, tell me about it. And they're like, 9:00, I just want to lie on the couch and not do anything. And I'm like, what time did you get up? And they're like, 5:36. And I'm like, good. You should be lying on the couch at 9:00 fatigued. That's what I've been doing too. So we have to we should have sustained energy through the day, but it's okay to, 9:00 is like, yeah, I'm ready for bed. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later, but and then I'm up early and with the sun and I have energy through the day. We shouldn't have crashes. Our hair shouldn't be falling out. Our skin should look good. Our weight should be stable. But if we have to that's such a big topic. We could do a whole podcast on it because women historically, we've been again trained, we got to be a size 0. And so what have you done to be a size 0? And what are you, what are maybe some unhealthy habits you're doing? And so then when you go through menopause, you gain 5 pounds and you don't have proper thinking around that. And then, so we have to be realistic about what our bodies should look like. But I mean, I can tell you that myself, because I had weight problems as a teenager and growing up, I'm in better shape and way less now than I did when I was in my 20s. So it is possible. We don't have to think that we're going to get fat and out of shape as we age. So we should just feel good. We should have clarity of mind. We should have motivation, low testosterone in a woman, because we always think of testosterone for the guys. But we need it too, just not as much, but we need it too. But if you don't have enough testosterone, it could be other things too, your dopamine and so forth, but you won't have motivation. So we should be excited. We should greet the day with like, ooh, I wonder what exciting things are going to flow through me and happen to me today, and be excited to contribute. I feel like postmenopausal women, like we are a force to be reckoned with once we feel good and our hormones are balanced, because we have so much life wisdom. And sometimes I just sit there and I'm just like, my gosh, I'm so much more sane than I was. I'm so not interested in really, I did that. Oh my God, what was I thinking? You just learn and grow. There really is truth with, as we grow older, we get wiser. And it's just a natural occurrence. And we have so much to give. I was saying this the other day, I don't know if it was during one of my summit interviews, but there was an Instagram of like a 75-year-old woman doing gymnastics. And it was going viral because I was like, ooh, look at her. Look at me. Like, wow, it's so weird. She's 75 and doing gymnastics. And, I don't want that to be the weird outlier. That is a normal thing for a 75-year-old to still be active physically. And, I was just in Germany studying at one of my clinics with one of my mentors. And he's 82 years old. And he works in the clinic every day. And he's sharp as a tack. And we went to lunch, the group and him, and I had to jog to keep up with him because he's walking so fast. And that there are people who are doing it. It doesn't have to. I want it to be, my generation. I'm 55. I grew up with, when my parents were in their 40s, they were old. But now we have this opportunity. My grandbabies, I'm running around and playing with them. And so they're going to grow up thinking, oh, Bubby's not this old lady. She's this active lady who does all this crazy stuff with us. And so it'll change what they think about aging. And so we have a responsibility, I feel, to our younger generations to be good role models for them, to show them that aging is a privilege. Not everyone has the opportunity to age. And aging, if you do have that privilege, is inevitable. All women are going to go through menopause. All human beings, we're all headed towards death at some point. And so I don't want to just extend the years. I want to make those extended years beautiful and meaningful and worth living.
Really optimize the quality of life. It's so beautiful.
Yes. Well said.
Absolutely. So we're wrapping up here, Dr. Stills, but I have my last two questions. One part is geared towards patients, and maybe practitioners listening can use this information. How do we get women to start thinking about what they want this next chapter to look like, to get those creative juices flowing? And I love this beautiful dichotomy that you paint on your website, and I just want to read it off because I thought that it was really profound and fun and resonated. You describe yourself as peacefully meditating or yelling excitedly while watching a New York Jets game. You like to buy shoes, yet you're frequently found barefoot. You truly know yourself. So how can we cultivate this in our fellow women?
Well, come hang out at my free summit, because I spend a lot of time talking about these things and interviewing experts from all over, where we talk about this and give you lots of tips and tools. And certainly you can take some of these tools. I think the first step is just going, wow, I need to step into the moment, and I need to step into realizing, like, my health, it's super corny, but my health is my wealth. Without my health, nothing else matters.
else do
You know,
we
you
have?
go this amazing vacation, but if you don't feel good, you're not going to enjoy it. And so we really have to start changing what we prioritize and putting health back at the center where it belongs. You know, before money, before, you know, I worked 80 hours and go me. You know, we need to start prioritizing our own health and our own self-knowledge of who we are and why we're here on this journey, and what is it that we're here to discover, to experience, and to give. Because I believe every individual and women have unique gifts. When we're talking to the women. So, you know, you all have a unique gift that you're here to share. And I always say, you know, I climbed Kilimanjaro, climbing mountains, and that like adventure, that's kind of my thing. But I want you to find out what your Kilimanjaro is. And it's a process. Like, I'm 55. I started on this journey in my early 20s. And I'm still learning, and I'm still growing, and I'm still figuring out, what does self-care mean to me? And is there another layer to peel? Is it more than just this? So it's a continual, it's this curiosity of knowing it's a journey, and we're not really looking to arrive at the fixed point, but we're constantly experiencing. And so what's important to you? Like taking, you know, I lead retreats, and part of that is because you can step outside of the day-to-day gerbil wheel, hamster wheel, and kind of think about, you know, what do I want to do? Like, I write down at the beginning of the year, I write down 113 things I want to experience this year. And they're varied, from goals in my business to venture experiences to experiences with my kids or my grandbaby. You know, they're varied, but like, if we don't take time to do these kind of things, we just go through, all of a sudden it's going to be 2024, the world just keeps spinning. And it is true, as you get older, it goes faster. That really is true. So it's like, oh my God, the year's already over already. And so, you know, thinking of your health, like for the patients, you know, not waiting, like get a team, get a doctor who listens, who understands, who, you know, going back to the beginning of what I said, who's open-minded, who, if you say, hey, I was listening to a podcast and this doctor who seemed to know what she was talking about said, you know, for hormones, you got to do 24-hour urine testing. Your doctor doesn't necessarily need to be doing it, but he or she needs to say, really? I don't know what that is. Let me find out. Did she say like what lab she uses? Like, it always blows my mind, especially with the work I do with patients dealing with cancer. Like, you know, if we don't do chemo, we don't do radiation, we do all these natural things, and their cancer goes into remission, it always blows my mind that their oncologist doesn't call me and say, what the heck did you do? Because I call other doctors. Like, when I see someone come in and they've had good, I'm like, who's your doctor? Let me call them. Or, you know, how did I get into hormones? I read a book that a patient brought me. So you want a doctor who's open-minded, who says, okay, let me go explore that and see. That's, you know, really important for your team. So you don't want to wait. You know, Dr. Emmy knows, you know, we're naturopathic physicians, prevention. And we are, you know, as a society, we don't wake up and go, holy macaroni, I feel so good today. Let me call Dr. Stills. You know, we wake up, and if we feel good, we just go about our business. And if we wake up and we feel kind of crummy, but we can push through it, we still don't call Dr. Stills, right? Often we don't call until we're like, it's interfering. I can't function. I can't get off the couch. I'm really, you know, I'm really losing it. And so I would say, wake up and call, you know, your doctor, find a doctor, and start to be preventative, start to pregame. So if you are, you know, say you're in your 30s now and you got pregnant easily, if that was what you chose, and your periods are every 28 days and you have no premenstrual symptoms, like, great, let your doctor know that so they can track you if things change. But the other thing I see, again, with that common, not normal, because I see this a lot in patients, like they'll come in and they'll say, you know, if they're a cycling woman, you know, do you have PMS symptoms? No. So then Dr. Emmy knows, you know, you have to break things down. You know?
Granular.
Like, oh, you're constipated. What exactly does that mean? Or, you know, oh, you move your bowels regularly. What does that mean? So then I'll say, oh, okay, well, just take me through a cycle. You know, what's it like before your period? oh, well, 3 days before my breasts get really tender, I crave chocolate, but it's no, that's not normal. That's your body telling you something's out of whack. So start paying attention to the sacred messages that your body is giving you and start putting your health first. Don't wait till it's like too late. Learn about, like, I'm not saying you have to be like fixated and thinking about menopause if you're in your 30s. Like, no, that's not healthy either. But, just have an awareness of it, like have an awareness and, just ask yourself, like, what do I think about this? Am I dreading it? Am I afraid of it? What are my beliefs? And are my beliefs, or are they my mother's beliefs or my auntie's beliefs or, and start to weed that out because this is your life. This is your journey.
Yep. Well, I think you shared so much wisdom, Dr. Stills, and we could keep going, and it's been such a pleasure. So we're going to wrap it up, though, and I want to thank you again for sharing so much insight and tucking in so many clinical pearls into this short time frame. So thank you so much. Before we let you go, do you want to let our listeners know where they can find you?
Well, Dr. Sharon Stills, you can just Google that. drstills.com is my website. Thanks for reading my fun bio. I
love your bio.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that was fun. And it's true. And, Dr. Talks, I host their Mastering the Menopause Transition Summit. We have one. My summit is launching September 5th. So it's free. I interviewed over 40 people. I worked my butt off. And, I give little mini talks so you can hear me talk more in detail, but it's free and, come check it out because it's a great place to learn no matter where you are in your hormonal journey.
Love it. I will be tuning in for sure. Thank you, Dr. Stills.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. And until next time, stay vibrant. Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.